That every conspiracy theory has some truth is a myth. In reality, most theories ride on one real fact muddled by guesses, selective memory, and a healthy dose of drama. It's like taking a single spark and lighting a whole forest with it. A leaked memo becomes the entire system is rotten. A tiny policy tweak becomes the whole country is being controlled. We'll keep it simple with everyday examples. Office gossip about a new policy, a social media post that cherry-picks facts, a science claim that mistakes correlation for causation. You'll see why it's easy to feel like something big is hidden, and how to tell if you're looking at a stretched version of reality. No heavy terms, just plain language and a couple of practical checks you can use right away. If you want to stop chasing every rumor and start thinking clearly about what's actually happening, you'll want to watch all the way through. The appeal of conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories offer simple answers to complex events, giving people clear villains and neat plots when the world feels tangled. In uncertain times, people crave a sense of control and a story they can follow. A sudden outage, a controversial policy change, or a surprising headline can morph into a narrative where someone planned it all and others benefited. Pattern recognition is a natural reflex. The mind loves tidy stories, so random events can be squeezed into a single explanation. Agency detection makes us want to mine behind a mystery. When a string of odd events happens at once, a blameworthy mastermind offers a story, not just a mess. Think about a quirky gadget that acts up and all those little glitches stacking up. Suddenly it feels plausible that someone pulled the strings. The wilder the claim, the more you feel you understand the world, even if the facts are fuzzy. Sharing a theory can feel like joining a club. People hear a story, then borrow it for social bonds, status, and the simple pleasure of feeling in know. Echo chambers push the idea deeper, and online feeds keep delivering the same vibe, like a playlist that never switches tracks. A sense of belonging can trump cautious thinking, and good-natured humor often slides into sharp certainty, which makes the group feel solid even when the claim isn't. To navigate this pull, take a steady approach. Check the sources and look for evidence that can be verified by more than one independent outlet. Consider alternative explanations that fit the same facts without needing a secret plot. Talk with someone who doesn't share the view and listen for what actually holds up under scrutiny. Ask who benefits from the claim and whether the story survives scrutiny in the real world, not just in a heated comment thread. A healthy skepticism can coexist with curiosity, and a little humor helps keep the edge from turning into a siege. What it means for a theory to be critical. Critical evaluation treats claims with a simple rule. Evidence comes first, belief comes second. This means you don't quit at the first promising detail or brush away the inconvenient ones. When a conspiracy claim pops up, you test it the way you would test a new gadget, by looking at how it works, what evidence there is, and whether the parts fit together. A critical view doesn't try to dunk on every strange idea. It tries to separate solid points from guesswork. It's a practical habit, not a mood. Key checks focus on clarity, evidence, and testing. A critical claim is specific enough to examine, not a blanket statement that can be bent to fit any outcome. It offers testable propositions rather than vague vibes. You ask, what would count as proof and what would count as refutation? If there's no clear way to test it, that's a red flag. Real-world examples help. If someone says a company secretly rewired a system to boost profits, a critical approach would look for documents, audits, or independent analyses that confirm or challenge that claim. If those don't exist, the theory remains unproven and unhelpful as an explanation. Critical thinking also checks where the information comes from. Is a claim backed by multiple independent sources or by a single unreliable post? Are the sources transparent about their methods and possible biases? Do the facts align with what we already know from everyday experience and established knowledge? Or do they require a complete rewrite of the last decade's worth of data? It's not about closing doors to strange ideas. It's about measuring them with a consistent yardstick. A kernel of truth can exist inside a bigger false story, and that's where many theories trip up. A small accurate detail does not prove the whole narrative. Applying this to conspiracy talk means staying skeptical without becoming closed-minded. Start by articulating what would prove the claim false and what would prove it true. Then seek those realities. If you test a claim and the evidence is thin, you say so and move on. If new, solid evidence appears, you revise your view. And yes, even in the most weird-sounding theories, there are useful questions to borrow. Who benefits? What would change if true? And how could others verify it independently? The goal is not to win the argument, but to get closer to what actually happened, with a little humor along the way to keep the process human. How official narratives are constructed. Official narratives are built by selecting what counts as important and then telling a story that fits a bigger goal. Facts are picked to fit the storyline. Spokespeople script talking points, briefings frame questions, and media partners echo the same language to create a single, recognizable voice. The process turns messy reality into a tidy arc people can follow without a map. Gatekeepers and institutions decide what information gets out and when. Leaks complicate the plan. A communication team may hold a background briefing, supply journalists with limited facts, and offer a controlled tour of events. A company might announce a product issue by highlighting quick fixes and customer safety, while downplaying the inconvenience to users. A city paints a disaster response as a flawless recovery, even as potholes stare back from the shadows. Repetition and density across channels help the narrative stick. Consistency matters. Repeated phrases, visuals, and symbols across press releases, social posts, briefings, and internal memos help people recognize the message, even if they only catch a glimpse. Think of how a familiar slogan or a steady color scheme can make a story feel credible, even when you haven't seen the full picture. People absorb the line without realizing a larger design is at work, like catching a chorus in a song and assuming every verse sounds the same. Messaging can be technically true, but incomplete. The truth gets squeezed into a frame that leaves out messy details. Soothing language, confident promises, and careful wording can mask the gaps. If a council approves a plan for improving a neighborhood, the official line might present it as a win for commuters, while the trade-offs and costs stay tucked away. Spotting the tactic means asking for sources, timelines, data, and alternative viewpoints. And a little healthy skepticism can be a practical tool, even if it's a bit less glamorous than a polished press briefing. Methods for evaluating explanations. Evaluating explanations means checking how well an idea matches the evidence and whether it can be tested. A solid explanation should fit the facts you already have, and it should make new predictions you can check. It should also be possible to prove it wrong if the right counter-evidence appears. In practice, that means asking clear questions instead of swallowing the story whole. First, look at the sources behind the claim. Are they reliable, and do they come from more than one place? A single anonymous post or a rumor talked about by the same people again and again isn't strong footing. Independent verification, reports, documents, or data from different teams or outlets is much more persuasive. Simple stories often feel satisfying, but they can be easy to cherry-pick. If a claim depends on a handful of dramatic anecdotes, that's a red flag to slow down and test it further. If it relies on a dramatic image or a striking quote, ask what else would be true if the claim were real. Next, test what would have to be true for the explanation to hold up. It helps to imagine the opposite. What would disprove it? This is called thinking about falsifiability in plain terms. If no amount of new evidence could shake the claim, that's a warning sign. Look for competing explanations that fit the same data just as well or better. If there's a simpler story that explains more with less fuss, it's usually a better bet. Also check how the explanation handles inconsistencies. A strong claim should account for contradictory information rather than sweep it under the rug. Consider how the explanation would perform in everyday life. Does it predict outcomes you can observe or test? For example, if someone says a certain action was taken to benefit a donor, you'd expect to see related decisions in similar situations or documented patterns in budget or policy details. If those follow-up signals don't show up, the explanation weakens. On the other hand, If testing something reveals consistent results across different people and settings, the claim gains traction. If not, it's wiser to rethink it. A good rule of thumb is to chase explanations that survive multiple checks rather than those that feel satisfying on first listen. Finally, beware of bias and hype. People often latch onto an explanation that confirms what they already believe, and that can blind you to weak spots. Take time to pause, breathe, and recheck the math behind the claim in plain language. If an explanation sounds too neat or too sweeping, it deserves a closer look. The goal isn't to win an argument, but to get closer to what's actually happening. When you evaluate explanations this way, you equip yourself to separate sturdy reasoning from the noise, without needing a detective's badge to do it. Evidence across cases, when theories align or fail. Across many investigations, patterns emerge that either align or clash across different cases. When independent examples point to the same mechanism, the claim gains a kind of plausibility. But that plausibility can be a mirage. Similar results can come from blind spots or simple mistakes. A data mix-up in one place can mimic a coordinated effort, which is why cross-case evidence deserves careful weight. It can feel like the truth serum of messy claims, except it sometimes tastes like bad coffee. Evidence alignment across cases is strongest when the same conclusion appears using different methods, teams, and data sources. For example, a rumor about budget tricks cropping up in several departments would require independent audits, vendor records, and internal messages to tell a similar story. If those sources whisper the same concern, the theory begins to look plausible. But even then, it's wise to ask what else could create the pattern. A common vendor, a software glitch, or a policy that's confusing rather than conspiratorial. Facts can travel through channels, and channels can mislead. When theories fail to align, red flags fly. One case might show solid records. Another might reveal red flags. The mismatch signals the theory is off or overgeneralized. Some parts of a narrative can be true while the rest collapses under scrutiny. For example, a tiny truth, such as a legitimate data collection practice, can be blown out of proportion to fit a grand story. People mix separate issues, turning a local problem into a global secret plan, and that's how confusion grows. A moment of humor. The conspiracy begins to look less like a mastermind and more like a messy inbox. To evaluate cross-case evidence in everyday terms, check for independence of sources, seek multiple lines of corroboration, and beware cherry picking. Ask whether the same conclusion holds up to new data or different tests. Consider alternative explanations that fit the same clues. And keep it human. Patterns can form because people respond to common incentives or constraints, not because there is a single shadowy mastermind. In short, evidence across cases can strengthen a theory, but does not prove the story true. It narrows the field and invites deeper digging. Risks and limits of conspiracy and official narratives. Many conspiracy theories begin with real questions or unexplained events. When a small clue shows up, people sometimes fill in the blanks with a bigger story. That leap from a simple hint to a grand plot happens because our brains look for patterns and dislike dangling uncertainties. A single odd detail can grow into a myth. Official explanations come from the best data available at the moment, but they are not the whole story. They are shaped by what authorities know, what they can share, and what won't crash the whole system if revealed. The first message after a scare often emphasizes safety and control. Then later updates may add nuance or new details as more evidence comes in. That doesn't mean a conspiracy is real. It means investigations take time and new facts can shift what we think. Conspiracy thinking can blind people to real problems that deserve attention. Chasing secret plots distracts from fixing everyday failures that are visible and addressable. If a city has a recurring problem with potholes, or a company quietly improves safety after a complaint, chasing a hidden agenda rather than listening to independent testers and transparent reports delays real solutions. It's a bit like worrying about aliens while the washing machine floods the kitchen. There's a time for wonder, but you still need to deal with the mess. To navigate risks on both sides, look for solid evidence and independent verification. Check multiple sources, honest corrections, and clear data you can actually inspect. Be comfortable with uncertainty and understand that not every mystery needs a grand design to explain it. A good approach is to separate what you can prove from what you suspect and to test ideas against what credible observers agree on. Sometimes the simplest explanation is, well, simply incomplete rather than a vast, hidden scheme. Bottom line, not every conspiracy theory is at least partly true. Truth can show up in small pieces here and there, but that doesn't mean the whole claim holds up. In real life, we see this all the time. A rumor might start after one odd event, then spread because it feels dramatic or fits what people already worry about. When you ask for receipts, though, you often find gaps, misread data, or plain coincidences that were blown up. Conspiracy stories like to fill those gaps with guesses, and those guesses can make the whole thing seem more solid than it actually is. So the right move is to look for credible sources, test claims against observable facts, and watch out for cherry picking, only grabbing the parts that sound convenient and ignoring the rest. And yes, it's okay to be curious and to question things. It's not a failure to admit you don't have all the answers yet. It's how you avoid being taken in by vibes over evidence. If this helped, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss our next drop. Tell me in the comments about a theory you bumped into online and wanted a sanity check. In the next video, we'll tackle myth 4. Can numbers and headlines be trusted? We'll unpack how stats get stretched and how to read them without needing a calculator the size of a small suitcase. See you there.